Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, you all are having a wonderful day today. So it's a little bit later overall at this point in time of day when it comes down to it, and I don't usually review videos this late. But I thought that I would give one last video for y'all, and I do want to thank all my most recent subscribers and watchers of the channel. All in all, I certainly hope that you enjoy the content and overall what I try to do here. And basically what my message is that I try to be the most logical and objective person possible. But I made a couple videos today, especially of that of Saul Canelo Alvarez. And if you've seen my history of videos, or if you've scrolled through my feed, the main person overall that I tend to talk about, especially as of lately, is Mr. Saul Canelo Alvarez. Why is that? Because Canelo Alvarez, in my opinion, as I've said, he is the clear #1 pound-for-pound fighter. I usually tend to talk about the most popular fighters. So when I do talk about fighters, they're usually going to be tending to be Canelo Alvarez, Saul Canelo Alvarez, Terrence Bud Crawford, Errol Spence Jr., Vasyl Lomachenko, Tyson Fury, Alexander Usyk, Anthony Joshua, Deontay Wilder, etc., etc., and maybe other names that perhaps I'm not talking about. But anyways, I wanted to make this video when it comes down to it because basically this is going to be into a new series that I'm going to make, which is basically the simple message: haters are always going to hate. It just is what it is, you know. And like I said, I'm not this major Canelo Alvarez fanboy. I'm not a fanboy of any of these fighters. All I try to do is just put my logical and objective mind to the task overall and try to break down certain things. But basically, there was a certain amount of people in my video, or a couple of videos overall, when I said that there was a possibility that Canelo could face Jermall Charlo next. Some people asked me, well, why should Jermall Charlo get the Canelo Alvarez fight next? Why should he face Jermall Charlo next and not that of an Olunga Makabu, or all in all, you know, maybe not a Joe Smith Jr. or someone else? Well, just to answer that question, I do believe that the Jermall Charlo fight is a very decent fight. Jermall Charlo is not necessarily someone, in my opinion, that, you know, that I believe is actually going to beat Canelo, but he is someone, in my opinion, that's a very decent name. It reminds me a little bit of the Errol Spence Jr. versus Danny Swift Garcia fight. No one really thought that Danny Garcia was going to defeat Errol Spence Jr., but Danny Swift Garcia is someone I know that you do want on your resume, because Danny Swift Garcia is a two-weight division champion. He's someone all in all that at least is, you know, somewhat of a slick fighter. He's a very decent fighter. He does have some big names on his resume. Now, in my opinion, Jermall Charlo, he doesn't really have the big names on his resume, maybe like a Danny Swift Garcia had. Of course, Danny Swift Garcia, he was able to beat Lucas Matisse, you know, the Machina Matisse, I believe, back when he was a big thing. He also was able to defeat Amir Khan when he was a big thing. But Jermall Charlo, when it comes down to it, what I'll say is this: he basically is like a bigger version of Danny Garcia. That's what he basically reminds me of. So Canelo, when it comes down to it, this is going to be another big win in his career, basically like that of a Billy Joe Saunders, a Caleb Plant, a Danny Jacobs. I don't think I would quite compare to the Gennady Golovkin level, because I don't think that Jermall Charlo is quite the fighter that a Gennady Golovkin was when he was at his peak, when he was within the top 5 pound for pound. But it is a very decent win. But a certain amount of the people asked me, do you think that, or they said in the comments, you know, if Canelo Alvarez does beat Jermall Charlo, do you think all in all that they're finally going to give him his credit, and this is basically finally going to snap the narrative that Canelo Alvarez does not face undefeated black fighters? Let me just say this right now. Like I said, a true hater is not going to give the person that they hate overall, they're never going to give them credit when it comes down to it. And you can see this with some of the channels. This video that I'm going to review is by a new media channel, one of the more diluted channels, by Mr. AKHi TV. And basically, how I know overall that they're not going to give Canelo Alvarez any credit, just listen to some of the things that AKHi TV has to say in this video. Now, you would think because of how many times they have really wanted this Jermall Charlo versus Canelo Alvarez fight, that basically they would be jumping up and down at the news on knowing that Mr. Saul Canelo Alvarez, that he would be taking this fight. But what AKHi TV is really going to do is that he is going to make a chamber of excuses prior to this fight, just in case Jermall Charlo loses, which more than likely he more than probably will. That's not me saying that Jermall Charlo does not have a chance. Of course, Canelo should not underestimate him. He is a very top-notch fighter. But when it comes down to it, I just don't see Jermall Charlo having the style to beat that of a Saul Canelo Alvarez. But we'll see what happens. Anyways, we're going to review this video. Let's see what Mr. AKHi TV has to say.
You said you would be interested in fighting Jake Paul. Do you think Jake Paul is better than Demetrius Andre?
No. No worse.
All right, who is better, Benavidez or Charlo in your opinion?
Both fighters are great. Both fighters are great fighters.
Let me actually talk about that real quick, because Canelo Alvarez actually mentions 3 opponents that, in my opinion, could be in his near future. He mentioned Jermall Charlo, he mentioned David Benavidez, and he also mentioned Jake Paul. And I do believe that Jake Paul versus Canelo Alvarez fight, it very well could happen. Just like the Floyd Mayweather Jr. versus Conor McGregor fight, or the Floyd Mayweather Jr. versus Logan Paul fight. Jake Paul is very interested in that Saul Canelo Alvarez fight. I do truly believe that. Do I think that he'll beat Canelo? Of course not. I don't think that if Canelo really went at him hard, I don't think that he would last 3 rounds. But when it comes down to it, all in all, bottom line is this. I do think that boxing looks at that as a very, very big money fight. Because at the end of the day, even though some people can say that it's a circus show, everyone would be tuning into that.
I can pick one because they are good fighters.
Jermall, do you think Canelo's move to 168 means that he don't want no smoke at 160?
He's scared. Where you at, Cinnamon? We've been calling you out for a long time. It's that time to show up. Show up.
It's so clear that this dude, Jermall Charlo, has been waiting for that Canelo Alvarez lottery ticket for years and years and years. And it's no offense against Jermall Charlo, but it took 7 men and a goat to get him in the ring with Julian J-Rock Williams. And he literally hasn't gotten in the ring with any other dangerous fighter ever since then. I mean, some people would say Sergey Derevyanchenko, but Sergey Derevyanchenko, I mean, come on. He already had 2 losses on his record by the time that Jermall Charlo fought him. You know, it's interesting because these same channels, they'll always say that Vasyl Lomachenko is this big hype job. Now, of course, Vasyl Lomachenko, he's compared on a completely different level than what Sergey Derevyanchenko was. So maybe one would understand that. But Vasyl Lomachenko is a person that's a 3-weight division champion and has wins over multiple A-grade fighters. Sergey Derevyanchenko, he doesn't even have 1 big win in his career. Now, of course, some people would debate that he should have, got the deserved win over Gennady Golovkin. I would have to rewatch that fight, but it was very, very close. But all the other fights, he very clearly lost. So it is what it is.
We give the people what they want to see. The people want to see us fight the best in the world. We feel like we're the best in the world. Come on, man. Stop running behind De La Hoya. Stop doing all that, man.
You feel like you're the best in the world, but yet you won't go up to 168 and challenge David Benavidez. Or all in all, when it comes down to you won't face Demetrius Boo Andrade. Now, some people like Dante's Boxing Nation, they may make the point, well, if you truly believe that Canelo's the #1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world, what's the problem with going after the #1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world? There's no problem with that, but at the end of the day, if you're just alleging all in all that you want this one fighter and you're not willing to go after anyone else, are you truly interested in going after that fighter or really facing A-grade top-shelf competition? Or are you just trying to get that lottery ticket? It just is what it is.
I'll go to Mexico and fight Canelo at his house. Ronnie. Will we not fight Canelo at his house? We will go to Mexico. We love Mexico. We from Texas, bro.
Well, shouldn't that fight happen in Cowboy
Stop
Stadium?
playing, bro. We want to go to Mexico. We love Mexico. We vacate to Mexico. We got a house in Mexico.
You would go right up to 68 for the
Right now. I'm more than 68 right now.
If you have a swollen prostate, stop, you need to see this. A 15-second
Right now.
Breaking news of Canelo Alvarez fighting Jermall Charlo more likely than Maccabi on Cinco de Mayo. According to ESPN,
These people overall don't even respect Maccabi enough to pronounce his name even somewhat correctly. They say he said Maccabi. What? Who the fuck is Maccabi?
Coppinger.
Cruiserweight or against Nakambu. I'm hearing that it's much more likely that he's going to fight Jermall Charlo on Cinco de Mayo. There are talks right now for that fight.
Now, like always with Canelo, there's good news and bad news that comes along with it, attached like a package. So let's start off with the good news of Canelo supposedly, possibly.
There should be nothing but good news, unless there's a weight drain or anything along those sorts. There should be nothing but good news. Why would there be any bad news? Like I said, AKHi TV, he already has 1,200 excuses loaded in his .45 Magnum. It just is what it is. Or loaded in that revolver. It just is what it is. He has one excuse at a time. This is why I say, haters, if they truly hate someone, or if they truly have an agenda against that person, they're not going to give that person credit. Take a look at Isaiah Thomas, the starting point guard for the Detroit Pistons. Even to this day, after Michael Jordan won 5 MVPs, a Defensive Player of the Year award, 6 NBA championships. He still to this day hates that man. He still to this day will say, even though he may not say it completely on live air, he always tries to say that LeBron James is greater than Michael Jordan. And in Isaiah Thomas's mind, he does not even truly believe that Michael Jordan is over Magic Johnson or Larry Bird. So this is what I'm saying. You can tell that these dudes, they have a real agenda over Canelo Alvarez.
Fighting Charlo.
And it's not just Canelo. It's Vasily Lomachenko, Alexander Usyk, Tyson Fury. So it is what it is. Once again, it's very clear how they roll.
Next instead of Makabu. I mean, it makes all of the sense in the world for Canelo to do so, because that's the fight that the whole world have been calling for the past 7 to 8 years. And when you factor in all of the elements at hand, it's right up Canelo alley to fight Charlo next, since out of the fabulous 4 of Canelo's time, Jermall Charlo looked the most vulnerable his last fight out of the bunch.
You see that? You see what AKHi TV just said there? Basically what he just said there is that Jermall Charlo looked the most vulnerable out of basically the Fabulous 4. Now, I don't know all in all who he's talking about when he's talking about the Fabulous 4. Maybe he's including Canelo Alvarez in that bunch, or maybe he was talking about another contender, maybe Archer Beef. I don't know. But when it comes down to it, like I said, Canelo Alvarez, when it comes down to it, once again, the narrative that these guys always try to spread, like I said, they're not going to give him credit. It doesn't matter. So the people all in all that say, oh, well, this is finally going to snap the narrative that he doesn't face undefeated black fighters, they don't care if Canelo Alvarez faces 17 undefeated black fighters in a row. They don't care. When it comes down to, like I said, their agenda is that they want a Terrence Bud Crawford or Errol Spence Jr. to be the face of boxing. So they're going to spread the false narrative that Canelo Alvarez is the number 1 pound-for-pound fighter just because he's this big, white, Caucasian hope. That's basically, the narrative that they're going to spread.
And it ain't no secret. Canelo always fight fighters coming off their worst performances.
No, he doesn't. And I've addressed this narrative a multitude of times. Most of the fighters that he's fought have usually been near the best point in their career, if not the best point in their career. He fought Sonny Lara, Austin Trout, Gennady Golovkin, when they all were coming off of decent performances. Every single one of them. It just is what it is. Or at least had a very decent victory in their career. Sergey Kovalev, he had a little bit of problems against Anthony Yard, but he was mainly dominating him and knocked him out. So it is what it is. Billy Joe Saunders, he had a little bit of an iffy performance against this one Latino fighter that I don't really know the name of. And then, of course, after that, he fought Martin Murray, completely embarrassed him. Caleb Plant, when it came down to it, very couple dominant performance. So, like I said, miss me with that bullshit of, oh, Canelo, he picks and chooses his fights when they're coming off his worst performances. Bullshit. It is what it is.
Kovalev, Billy Joe Saunders, Caleb Plant, Triple G, Caleb Smith, after Robin Ryder, and the list goes on and on and on. So
now, I would have to take a look at the Callum Smith fight. Now, from what I heard, Callum Smith, he wasn't very impressive in that Ryder fight. But besides that fight, Canelo was usually facing people out of a very, very good performance in their career. And that's not even me mentioning Miguel Cotto.
It makes sense for Canelo to fight Charlo next, since Jermall Charlo looked like complete crap against Montiel. If you go back...
But you think that Jermall Charlo has the ability to beat Canelo Alvarez, so what you talking shit for? This is the fight you've been waiting for 17 years, apparently. Now, of course, obviously it hasn't been that long. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but several years. This is a fight that you've been waiting for, and all you LDBC and new media boys have been alleging that you want to see. You think that Canelo Alvarez has been facing fighters that are on a lesser level than that of Jermall Charlo. So why are you already putting 12 excuses in the barrel?
To my videos of Jermall Charlo last fight against Montiel, I told all of you guys, both Canelo and Benavidez will knock out that version of Charlo. But even then, that version...
So basically what is AKHi TV saying? Canelo Alvarez, if he does beat Jermall Charlo, it's because Jermall Charlo is not the same fighter.
...of Jermall Charlo will be 10 times more competitive than Makabu will ever be against Canelo.
I'm not so sure about that. Don't get me wrong, I think Jermall Charlo is more skilled than that of an Ilunga Makabu. But when it comes down to it all in all, I just think that Makabu would debatably be a bigger challenge for Canelo just because he's bigger. I think that Jermall clearly is more skilled than that of an Ilunga Makabu. But, like I said, if you're about the same size as Canelo, and if you don't clearly have an out-of-this-world skill set, I just don't see you beating him. And Jermall Charlo, like I said, he reminds me of a bigger version of Danny Garcia. he has some slick moments. Very good jab, you know, not the worst feet that I've seen, but they're not extremely fast. He doesn't have extremely fast footwork when it comes down to it. He don't have A-grade head movement, and you can get him to lose confidence within the fight. You know, he has great heart, but when it comes down to it, you know, especially if you have someone of a slick style, and if you're able to push him back, you can get Jermall Charlo to lose confidence, and he'll throw less and less. He's very, very similar to Danny Garcia.
Alavrez. I mean, Charlo.
But of course, Jermall Charlo does pack a hell of a wallop of a punch. So we'll see how well Canelo does handle Jermall Charlo. But in my opinion, I do believe that Canelo Alvarez more than likely beats him.
Can party his life away, like he's doing anyway. Under any condition, Charlo.
But yet you don't say the same thing about Errol Spence. And don't get me wrong, I don't think that it's a great thing that Canelo Alvarez was in the club when it comes down to it. You know, hopefully he does not continue doing that. But like I said, the real person you should be worried about is Errol Spence Jr. I mean, shit, from what I heard behind the scenes, that man's going to need a liver transplant the way that he drinks sometimes. But it is what it is.
Charlo will put on a better fight than Makabu will ever do against Canelo. However, if the Charlo that fought Derevyanchenko showed...
Why don't you bring up overall Billy Joe Saunders, Caleb Plant? Why don't you bring up them? Because AKHi TV knows truly deep down when it comes down to that Charlo, he's about on their same level. And I've been saying this for months upon months upon months upon months. And when it comes down to these guys always try to tell me, oh no, Charlo is clearly above them. No, he's not. He has more power than them. That's about it. It is what it is.
If the Charlo that knocked out J. Rock Williams shows up against Canelo Alvarez, oh, it's a wrap. Charlo is...
Oh, it's a wrap. No, it's not a wrap. I don't even think the best version of Jermall Charlo. You know, go ahead and watch the Sergey Derevyanchenko fight. I actually took a look at some highlights. I watched the Danny Jacobs Canelo Alvarez highlights, and I watched the Derevyanchenko versus Jermall Charlo some rounds. When you even take a look at Jermall Charlo at his best, like when he fought Sergey Derevyanchenko, he's just way too hittable. His head movement is not there when it comes down to it. He's a hitter overall for a jab when it comes down to it. He's a sucker for a right hand. He just doesn't move well enough, in my opinion. And on top of that, his feet, they're just not fast enough.
Beating Canelo, without a doubt. And that's the...
If you're going to beat Canelo, in my opinion, you have to have, like I said, you have to have all-around decent skills, decent power, very fast feet. Jermall Charlo, to me, he just doesn't fit that profile. He's very powerful. You know, he is somewhat slick, but like I said, he's slick like a Danny Garcia is slick. Not like a Terrence Bud Crawford is slick.
Canelo is not willing to take. He's afraid of that lion that's in Charlo. Not the one that's drinking all day and night. I'm talking about the hungry Charlo. They used to sleep, breathe, and shit boxing.
So once again, what is AKHi TV saying? That Jermall Charlo, he's not the same. So he's already making excuses. I've already said this. Like I said, haters don't ever give the respect that is deserved. They're not going to. These guys have a clear agenda. And they're not going to end it. They're never going to end the Canelo Alvarez hate because, like I said, their clear agenda is to have Canelo Alvarez not at the #1 pound-for-pound list. And what do you do with a person all in all that is on a very high level and all in all you're trying to degrade them and you know that the person that you want or you want to be on that person's level, what is the only thing that they can do? They can degrade them. That's the only thing that they can do and bring them to a lower level. That's the only thing they can do.
Wanted all of the smoke. Like he did.
Because at the end of the day, you cannot put Jermall Charlo or Demetrius Andrade or David Benavidez or any of those fighters that I just mentioned on the Canelo Alvarez level. So that's why on a daily basis, they always have to try to tear this dude down.
It with J-Rock, so on and so forth. Not this version of Jermall Charlo that's disconnected with reality and the world. But again,
Jermall Charlo has always been this. Really, both Charlo brothers have been disconnected with reality for a very, very long time.
Even then, Canelo is not willing to take the risk, even though he will still get the full credit if he beats Charlo.
He'll get the full credit, but you just made 1,200 excuses. I got you.
Therefore, let's talk about the bad news at hand. Now, this news sounds all good and dandy, but we all know it's too good to be true. Since that's not how Canelo Alvarez moves. It ain't no secret. Canelo is the pioneer.
What do you mean? I thought that Canelo Alvarez likes to fight people off their worst performances. And according to you, Charlo is coming off of his clear worst performance. Even though I think the worst performance of his career probably was that Matt Korobov fight. But it is what it is.
Of the NBF league in the sport of boxing. Therefore, I won't believe it till I see it, because when I check...
I love this narrative how Canelo never fights elite black fighters. It'd be different if he was facing, but then again, these are the same guys that claim that Jermall Charlo, that he's facing guys within the deepest divisions of boxing. Like Erickson Lubin and, Julian Paper Mache Chin Williams and Jarrett Hurd, who's basically a punching bag with arms when it comes down to it. These are the elite black fighters. Like, come on, man.
On Charlo Instagram.
But Canelo has fought Laura. He's fought Danny Jacobs. He's fought Austin Trout. All those guys, when he fought them, were A-grade fighters. It just is what it is.
He's over here going back and forth with Caleb Plant. And we all know if the...
Caleb Plant is on the same level as Jermall Charlo. And to be quite honest with you, Caleb Plant at his peak is slicker and faster-footed than Jermall Charlo. Just is what it is.
Canelo fight is on the table for Charlo. He won't even be entertaining Caleb Plant at the moment in time. Knowing the fact that Jermall Charlo...
Really? Because I've heard a multitude of times that Caleb Plant and Jermall Charlo could happen. We'll see if Jermall Charlo really is overall going to take the Canelo fight.
Have been calling out and chasing Canelo for the past 8 years. And would you believe, the European assassin Canelo Alavrez have been ducking Jermall Charlo and Demetrius and...
Once again, this dude calls Canelo Alvarez the European assassin. Who does Jermall Charlo fight? That is an elite black fighter. That is an elite Latino fighter. The best wins of his career are over Matt Korobov, Sergey Derevyanchenko, and Julian J. Rock Williams. Why is Jermall Charlo not another European assassin? He's not interested in the David Benavidez fight. He's not interested in Demetrius Andrade fight. Once again, very clear overall who they're against.
Great. For the past 8 years. But that's beside the point. The main thing here is, every time Canelo Alvarez is about to make a legendary cherry pick in order to make up history, like he's doing today with Makabu or Maccabi, however you pronounce his name, no disrespect.
It's Makabu. How the hell would you pronounce it Maccabi? There's no I in there. I don't know. Maybe that's the way they pronounce it in Africa. I don't know. Maybe I'm missing something. I don't know.
No one knew Makabu till Canelo chose to cherry pick him in order to make up history, like he did with Rocky Fielding, Avni, and the list goes on and on and on. Now,
like I said, they always mention Avni Yildirim and Rocky Fielding, but they won't mention Billy Joe Saunders and Caleb Plant usually in the same breath, because they know that Billy Joe Saunders and Caleb Plant were on a different level. Because they know all in all that Caleb Plant and Billy Joe Saunders are decent fighters.
I don't know if you guys have noticed, it's been a pattern here. Every time Canelo selects a legendary cherry pick, all of a sudden, we hear Canelo name being in the mix with all of these great fights. With Benavidez, Charlo, Andrade, Beterbiev, you name it. Only for Canelo to let the public down, once again, on some DJ Khaled. Another one. Another letdown.
Damn, I guess AKHi TV thought that line was smooth. I guess he thought that he had bars.
Because Canelo ends up selecting the same old cherry. Therefore, if you have...
I don't know, I've never understood this narrative. But of course, I know what bullshit they're up to. How can you allege that a person that's fought Gennady Golovkin, a person who's fought Araceli Lara, like once again, it'd be different if he was a Mikey Garcia and never fought the overall threat of the division, but Canelo has not done that.
Got the memo. If
you fight Danny Jacobs, Miguel Cotto, Gennady Golovkin, Sergey Kovalev, Caleb Plant, Billy Joe Saunders, Callum Smith, Araceli Lara, you deserve a little bit of respect.
If you don't know, now you know. Essentially, it's a marketing tool for Canelo to promote the cherry he's going to fight in Makabu. We have seen this story unfold too many times. As many times as Canelo let his own fans down by stating, and I quote, "I really don't care." That's directed to the Canelo fangirls that defend Canelo for ducking. Canelo himself telling you decafs, he really don't care. He's proud of being a duck. Man, is it?
He doesn't care because I don't think Canelo Alvarez looks at David Benavidez or Jermall Charlo, in my opinion, as anything special. I don't know, and what I mean by that is that, well, let me not say that. He realizes that those are big fights. But when Canelo takes a look at them, he basically says, those guys, in my opinion, I fought opponents, in my opinion, that have already been greater in my career that I fought.
A terrible time to be a Canelo fan. especially when Canelo makes his own fans look like a bunch of fools. With that being stated, to all of you Canelo fangirls that continues to lie and claim, oh, Canelo sent Charlo an offer and Charlo turned it down. Well, if that's the case, why did Canelo Alvarez vacate his WBC title to his mandatory Charlo at the time? Explain to me how Canelo Alvarez...
I'd have to do a little bit more research digging on that, but I'm not sure all in all if Jermall did turn it down or not, but he could have. From what I heard, all in all, there is a possibility that he did do that. And I'm not sure if Canelo vacated it at the time when the thing was allegedly offered, or maybe if it was a little bit later on.
Got stripped of his WBC title when Charlo was his mandatory, and the mandatory was due. Why would they strip Canelo of his WBC title if Charlo turned down an offer? That's obviously a rhetorical question, because we've seen what happens when a mandatory turns down an offer from the champion, like Ryan Garcia did with Devin Haney. Ryan Garcia is still a nobody, an AKHi champion. The TikTok.
He's still a nobody. Ryan Garcia is not a nobody. No, I get it. He hasn't really defeated anyone, in my opinion, that's been that elite. But Ryan Garcia is another fighter that they don't like. And I get it. Ryan Garcia, you know, he seems to be a little bit more fluff and muff overall than sometimes what he does seem to be substance. But he is a talented fighter. But I do need to see him in the ring with more elite fighters.
And Twitter undisputed champion. But one thing Ryan Garcia is not is the WBC champion of the world. That's Devin Haney. Ryan even lost his mandatory position. Therefore, to all you decafs, if Charlo turned down an offer from Canelo, then he wouldn't be a champion today, just like Ryan Garcia. In fact, he would have lost his mandatory position as well.
Maybe. I would have to look it up through a little bit more, but I'm not always 100% sure how the sanctioning bodies work, because they always make rules up as they go along. But I would have to see.
Just like Ryan Garcia. But we all know Charlo became the WBC champion of the world, just like Devin Haney did, just like Lennox Lewis did, when Canelo created the NBF Witness Protection franchise. That's what Canelo legacy will be remembered for.
No, what his legacy will be remembered for is debatably being the greatest Mexican fighter of all time, and as an all-time great. You cannot have the resume that he has, but you guys overall are trying to put that propaganda in the minds of people because you don't want someone like that as the number one pound for pound.
Ducking, cheating, taking steroids, which that's essentially being a duck on steroids. Also losing, then robbing people with the judge's scorecards in his pocket. Last but not least,
you can allege a lot of people overall have debatably gotten robbed, but Canelo has, the majority of the time, won over his biggest fights. The only controversial fights, in his career have really been the first Gennady-Golovkin fight and maybe that Arasani Lara fight. But you can even debate that, the first fight with Golovkin, I wouldn't necessarily debate that he won. I think that he didn't really throw enough. But the fight with Arasani Lara, you can debate that maybe Lara did not throw enough.
Being the pioneer of the NBF league in the sport of boxing.
So basically what am I saying in this video? Like I said, and I've been saying this whole entire time, they're not going to give Canelo Alvarez credit. It just is what it is.
Black Fighters League. With the facts being laid out, if you disagree with any of the facts I mentioned.
AKHi TV, he said no Black Fighters League. I thought he said Pro Black Fighters League. That's what new media should change their name to, the Pro Black Fighters League. Because that's pretty much what they are.
Please point out exactly what I said you disagree with. And let me sincerely wish you great luck. Because facts always trump emotional...
Good luck, as if this dude actually put up a fucking wound out argument.
Opinions.
Canelo jumping up to 190. I haven't got any trainer's opinions yet on him wanting to fight. I don't know why he would do that. Why wouldn't he just continue to fight the top fighters that he hasn't fought already? But if he's doing that, I'm gonna say it's a duck.
You think it's a duck from David?
If you moving up there, and you could at least say, okay, I'm gonna take one more fight with a Charlo or one more fight with a Benavidez, and then I'll move up. But if you just gonna move up without fighting them guys at all, You know, it looks like a duck, it walks like a duck, it quacks like a duck. It's a duck.
Right, but once again, Canelo is not a Mikey Garcia. Canelo has already completely unified 168. So it is what it is. Now, I get it. I still want to see Benavidez and Charlo. But chasing history from Makabu, I don't necessarily mind it because it's not some weak champion necessarily at 175. Makabu is a cruiserweight. So all in all, I thought that fight would be somewhat acceptable. But it looks like maybe Canelo, he may turn his eyes towards Charlo after all.
My second.
Did you see Benavidez over the weekend, and how do you think that fight with Canelo would look? Because it seems like that's a lot of fight people were asking for.
It is a fight that everybody asks for. They're not asking for him to go up to cruiserweight and fight some dude that we don't know.
Makabu.
I don't know nothing about no Makabu. Know nothing about no Makabu.
WBC champ.
I don't care what he is. I'm telling you, I don't care who he is, but nobody know who he is. You know, and like I said, it's a.
Now, you notice that Timothy Bradley, when it comes down to it, sometimes they'll post some of his quotes on here, and then other times they'll basically call this dude a coon or an Uncle Tom if he says something against an Errol Spence Jr. or some fighter that they like.
Orchestrated greatness, bro. Like, stop. Stop with it already, bro. Like, you're undisputed. That's great. But we want to see you in a real fight. So the fight with Benavidez, I saw Benavidez on the weekend.
To Max, before I let you go, just Canelo. It's not Charlo. It's not Benavidez. It's not better BF. It's Makabu at cruiserweight. What do you think of that, Max?
I think good for him. He wants to go up to cruiserweight. But if you want to keep doing that stuff and you're going up above, then I don't want to hear it. Fight better BF. And
I would tend to agree with that. And like I said, if he is going to face Makabu next, he is going to have to face a legitimate champion next. You know, so let's say that this Charlo fight don't pan out, and if he faces Makabu, he is going to have to face a Joe Smith Jr., you know, an Archibald with Dimitri Bivol, a Charlo, a Benavidez, an Andrade, one of those boys. And I do know that David Benavidez, he's not a champion at the current moment in time, but I'm talking about championship caliber fighter.
Picking his own opponents, man. He needs to be in there with Charlo, both of them. He needs to fight both
Charlo.
He needs to fight both.
Now, Mike Tyson said that Canelo Alvarez should be in there with both of the Charlos. I think that Jermall is a good fight. Jermall, he is almost a completely unified champion at 154, but man, I don't think that, you know, I give Jermall Charlo about a 30 to 20% chance over Canelo. Jermall, he'd have about a 10, and that's the most I'd give him. If Jermall was able to beat Canelo Alvarez, that'd be the biggest upset that I would personally ever see, because Jermall, he just don't have it. And on top of that, he don't even have the same build as his brother Jermall.
Fight both of them. The guy get ready for Benavidez. He's gonna fight those two brothers, then he fight Benavidez. He did good his last fight, but the guy he fought with like soft. I want to see him fight one of those guys.
So drop your thoughts in the comment section below, subscribe below, and click on the notification bell to be continued on the next episode of AKHi TV. Peace, and I'm on to the next one.
On to the next excuse. Anyways, that's really about it for this video. But like I said, haters overall, they never usually give credit to the people, all in all, that, you know, they usually hate for so long, at least not until their career is over, you know. So it is what it is, but we'll see what happens. But it should be very, very interesting. But anyways, that's really about it for today, and I'll talk to you all later.